Hello, my amazing friends. Today, we start the story of a small shop that grew into a name you see on phones, TVs, fridges, and even in space technology. This is the story of Samsung. It's about trust, patience, and the courage to grow step by step. And as you listen, your English listening will get sharper because we keep it clear, simple, and interesting. Part 1. The Seed and the Three Stars. It's the year 1938. In a busy street in Daegu, Korea, a young man named Lee Byung-chul opens a tiny shop. He sells dried fish, noodles, rice, and a few other basic goods. The shop is small. The dream inside his mind is huge. Above the door, there's a wooden sign. It says Samsung, a Korean word that means 3 stars. 3 stars to him mean big, bright, and lasting. That's his goal. Lee knows something very important. People come back to the place they trust. If the fish is fresh, if the noodles are clean, if the delivery is on time, customers will return. So he checks everything himself. If the fish smells wrong, he sends it back. If the rice is low quality, he refuses it. Every customer leaves happy. They tell friends, "Go to Samsung." They are honest. Trust becomes his real product. Then, war comes to Korea. The streets are dangerous. Trains stop running. Prices change every day. Many businesses close. But Lee refuses to give up. He changes what he sells depending on what people need most. Some days it's food, some days it's fabric or soap. He finds new routes to bring supplies. He works day and night. This is where he learns. Speed is more powerful than size. A small business can move fast, and moving fast can save your life in business. After the war, Korea starts to rebuild. People need sugar, clothes, and many basic goods. Lee asks himself, why only sell these things? Why not make them? He begins producing sugar. Then he moves into textiles, making fabric and clothes. This is a big change. Selling is one thing. Making is much harder. But by making products, he can control quality, control cost, and make them better. He learns factories, workers, schedules, and planning ahead. One evening, Lee hears something new in the neighborhood. It's the sound of a radio. A voice from far away is talking. Families gather to listen. Not long after, someone brings home a television. Children laugh at the shows. Grandparents watch the news. Life is changing. Lee sees the future. People will need electronics just like they need rice and clothes. In 1969, Samsung begins making electronics. The first products are simple: black and white TVs, radios, and home appliances. At first, there are mistakes. Some TVs have a dim picture, some parts break. But instead of hiding problems, the team fixes them one by one. They learn to check every product. They make a rule. Better to stop the line than to send out a bad product. Slowly, customers start saying, Samsung products work. By the end of the 1960s, Samsung is not just a shop anymore. It's a company that believes in honest quality, controlling the process, patience before big growth. These values will guide Samsung for decades. And the small shop with 3 stars on its sign has taken its first step toward becoming a global name. Part 2. The Factory Mind and the First Big Steps. The 1960s had ended with a big change for Samsung. The little trading shop had now become a company that was making its own products: sugar, textiles, and now electronics. Black and white TVs, radios, and basic home appliances had started to leave Samsung's small assembly rooms. But this was just the beginning. Making electronics was a completely different world compared to selling dried fish or making sugar. It was more precise, more technical, and more competitive. The company was about to enter a game where mistakes could be deadly for a brand. When you walked into Samsung's first electronics factory in the early 1970s, you'd smell a mix of oil, fresh paint, and warm metal. Rows of workbenches were neatly lined up. On each bench sat radios, TV parts, and boxes of tiny screws. Young workers in clean white coats and caps moved carefully, almost like nurses in a hospital. Every part was checked by hand. Every wire was placed exactly where it belonged. A single mistake could mean the whole product would fail. Lee Byung-chul made one thing very clear. We will not be the fastest, but we will be the most careful. In the early days, not everything worked perfectly. Some TVs came back with fuzzy pictures. Some radios made strange noises after a few weeks. Some refrigerators had doors that didn't close properly. Instead of hiding these problems, Samsung did something different. They opened the broken products on a special table. The engineers and workers stood around looking inside. What went wrong? They asked. They took notes. They redesigned parts. They checked suppliers. Every mistake became a lesson. And slowly, these lessons started to shape Samsung's factory mind. The habit of always improving, always checking, always asking, can this be better? By the mid-1970s, Samsung's TVs and appliances were selling well in Korea. But Lee was thinking bigger. He knew that the real test was not just to sell in your own country. The real test was to export, to send your products to other countries and win customers there. So Samsung started looking for opportunities in Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. Exporting was not easy. Different countries had different rules, different tastes, and different price expectations. For example, some countries preferred bigger TV screens. Some wanted radios with better sound for music. Others wanted cheaper models with fewer features. Samsung had to learn to adapt to each market. This was a new skill, not just making products, but making the right products for the right people. One of Samsung's early big moments came when they secured deals to supply TVs to other Asian markets. These were not luxury TVs. They were affordable, simple models that worked well and lasted long. The prices were competitive. A customer in another country could buy a Samsung TV for much less than a European or American brand, and still get good quality. This strategy worked. Samsung began to build a reputation. Good quality at a fair price. Lee knew machines alone could not build a global brand. He needed skilled people. So Samsung started hiring young engineers and sending them abroad to learn. Some went to Japan to study advanced TV technology. Some went to the United States to learn about semiconductors. Some went to Europe to study factory automation. When these people returned, they trained others. Slowly, Samsung's knowledge base grew. They were no longer just copying ideas. They were starting to design and improve their own. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, Samsung didn't just stick to TVs and radios. They began making washing machines, refrigerators, air conditioners, microwaves. Each product line had its own challenges. For example, making a refrigerator was not just about cooling food. It was about keeping the temperature stable, making it energy efficient, and ensuring it would last for years without breaking. Samsung tested each product in different conditions: hot weather, cold weather, dusty air, humid air. If it worked in all these conditions, they released it. By the early 1980s, Samsung was no longer just a Korean company. They were slowly becoming a global player. But Lee knew the truth. To be truly global, they had to master technology, not just assembly. And that meant entering the world of semiconductors, the tiny chips that power electronics. Most people at the time thought this was crazy. Making chips was expensive, risky, and dominated by big Japanese and American companies. But Lee believed that without controlling the heart of the product, Samsung would always be behind. So, in 1983, Samsung made its first step into semiconductor manufacturing. It was a huge investment, costing millions of dollars, and it scared many people inside the company. But Lee had a clear vision. If we don't enter this now, we will regret it forever. Workers remember those days as intense but exciting. The new chip factories ran almost 24 hours a day. Technicians worked in clean rooms, special spaces where the air was filtered so no dust could touch the delicate chips. They wore full-body suits, gloves, and masks. It felt more like a science lab than a factory. Every batch of chips was tested again and again. Failures were common in the beginning, but slowly the success rate improved. Samsung began to make chips good enough to sell internationally. By the mid-1980s, Samsung's name was starting to appear in tech magazines abroad, not only for TVs and fridges, but for their growing ability in semiconductors. This was the foundation for everything that would come later: computers, smartphones, and more. Samsung had moved from being just a manufacturer to becoming a technology company, and the culture of improvement, discipline, and bold risk-taking was now deeply part of their DNA. By the mid-1880s, Samsung was no longer just a Korean company. They were making TVs, refrigerators, washing machines, microwaves, and, most importantly, semiconductors. The world was starting to notice them. But inside the company, there was a big problem. Yes, Samsung's products were selling. Yes, they were expanding. But compared to Japanese brands like Sony, Panasonic, and Sharp, Samsung was still seen as cheap but not premium. Many customers in other countries thought, Samsung products work, but they're not as good as Japanese ones. This was dangerous. Once people think your brand is low quality, it's hard to change their minds. And if you want to compete globally, your name must mean excellence, not just affordability. Lee Byung-chul understood this, but in 1987, he passed away. The leadership went to his son, Lee Kun-hee. This man would change everything. Lee Kun-hee was not loud or flashy. He was quiet, observant, and incredibly focused. He believed that Samsung's future depended on changing its culture from the inside. In the early 1990s, he traveled around the world to see how other companies worked. He visited stores in Europe, factories in Japan, and tech hubs in America. What he saw shocked him. In many places, Samsung products were placed on the lowest shelves in stores, literally below the eye level of customers. Meanwhile, brands like Sony were in the best spots, proudly displayed with premium prices. Lee Kun-hee knew this could not continue. He had to transform Samsung into a premium global brand. In June 1993, Lee Kun-hee called his top executives to a hotel in Frankfurt, Germany. They expected a short business meeting. Instead, they got a 10-day marathon discussion. Lee spoke with intensity. Change everything, except your wife and children. That became the famous Frankfurt Declaration. The moment Samsung's quality revolution began, he told them, "Stop focusing only on quantity. Focus on quality above all else. If a product is not the best, don't ship it. We must lead, not follow. This was not just talk. He backed it with action. Not long after his declaration, Samsung launched a new line of mobile phones. They were selling well in Korea, but Lee found out there were too many defects. Battery issues, bad screens, weak signals. He was furious. He ordered 150,000 defective phones to be burned in front of the employees. It happened in 1995 at a Samsung factory. Workers watched as the phones were stacked, smashed with hammers, and set on fire. The smoke rose into the sky. Lee stood there, silent, making sure everyone understood. Never again would Samsung accept bad quality. This was not just about phones. It was about changing the mindset of the entire company. After Frankfurt, Samsung invested heavily in training. Engineers learned advanced manufacturing techniques. Designers studied international trends. Factory workers were taught strict quality control methods. Even managers were sent abroad to understand global markets. This was expensive. Millions of dollars spent on education instead of just production. But Lee knew it would pay off. By the mid-1990s, the changes were showing results. Samsung's TVs were winning design awards. Their semiconductors were becoming some of the best in the world. They started selling premium home appliances that could stand next to Japanese products in quality. In 1996, Samsung entered the mobile phone market seriously. These early phones were basic compared to today's smartphones, large with small screens and physical buttons. But they were reliable, and customers started to notice. Then disaster struck. The Asian financial crisis hit in 1997. Currencies collapsed. Companies went bankrupt. Many people lost their jobs. Samsung was hit hard. Their debt grew, and the company had to cut costs fast. Lee Kun-hee made painful decisions. He sold off non-core businesses. He focused on electronics, engineering, and chemicals, the areas with the most potential. Thousands of employees were let go, but those who stayed were trained even harder. This crisis became another turning point. It forced Samsung to be lean, efficient, and sharper than ever. By the end of the 1990s, Samsung had survived and come out stronger. They were no longer just a cheap alternative brand. They were becoming a serious competitor to the biggest names in electronics. Their semiconductors were world-class. Their TVs were winning international awards. And their mobile phones were starting to get attention outside Korea. Samsung had entered the new century ready for battle. Part 3. From Crisis to Global Rise. The Asian financial crisis had shaken the walls of Samsung. Factories that once ran day and night were slowed. Some projects were cut. Workers left with heavy hearts. But Lee Kun-hee saw the crisis differently. To him, it was not just a wound. It was a wake-up call. If Samsung wanted to be untouchable, it had to become stronger than ever. And this meant one thing: focus. Samsung had fingers in many industries: construction, insurance, retail, and more. Lee made a bold decision. We cannot be the best at everything. We must be the best at something. He chose 3 areas to dominate: electronics, phones, TVs, appliances; engineering, infrastructure, heavy industries; chemicals, materials for technology and manufacturing. Everything else? Sold, shut down, or merged. It was painful. Some parts of the company had been there for decades. But this laser focus was the reason Samsung would later stand shoulder to shoulder with the world's biggest brands. While customers knew Samsung for TVs and home appliances, something far more powerful was happening quietly. Samsung was becoming a giant in semiconductors, the tiny chips inside computers, cameras, and eventually smartphones. Memory chips like DRAM and NAND flash were the gold of the tech world. Every device needed them. And here's the genius. Samsung wasn't just making chips for themselves. They were selling them to everyone, even competitors. If you bought a Dell laptop or a Canon camera, chances were that Samsung made the memory inside it. This gave Samsung billions of dollars in revenue, control over one of the most expensive, important parts of electronics, a seat at the table with the biggest tech companies in the world. By the early 2000s, Samsung had become the #1 memory chip maker on Earth. While the brain of electronics was in chips, the face was in the screen, and Samsung wanted to own that too. In the 1990s, most TVs and monitors were bulky boxes with glass screens, but a new technology, LCD, liquid crystal display, was emerging, thin, light, and clear. The problem? It was expensive. Many companies hesitated to invest heavily. Samsung didn't. They built huge LCD factories, betting that one day every screen in the world would be flat. By 2005, Samsung was a global leader in LCD panels. Not just for their own products. Other companies bought their screens too. Even rivals sometimes had Samsung inside without showing the name. While Samsung was winning in chips and screens, one battlefield was still uncertain. Mobile phones. Nokia and Motorola were the kings. They had style, reliability, and global reach. Samsung was seen as fine. Their phones worked, but they weren't exciting. That started to change in the early 2000s. Samsung began making phones that looked sharper, felt better in the hand, and introduced new features. The Samsung SG-HT100 in 2002 was a game changer. It was one of the first phones with a color screen. Bright, vibrant, and different from the dull green displays people were used to. Suddenly, Samsung wasn't just following. They were adding style to their technology. But Lee Kun-hee knew something important. In the global market, brand image is as powerful as technology. In 2002, Samsung launched a new brand identity. Clean logos, sleek advertising, sponsorships of big events like the Olympics. The message was clear. Samsung was no longer the affordable option. It was a premium technology brand. The mid-2000s brought a storm in the mobile world. Companies started experimenting with touchscreens, internet on phones, and app-like features. Samsung tested early smartphones with keypads and small touch areas. They weren't perfect, but they taught Samsung how to handle. Bigger batteries, mobile internet, touch interface design. Then in 2007, Apple dropped a bomb. The iPhone. The entire phone industry shook. Some brands laughed at it. Some tried to copy it badly. Many disappeared. Samsung didn't laugh. They prepared. In 2009, Samsung released its first Galaxy phone using Google's Android system. It was their first real step into modern smartphones. The big leap came in 2010 with the Galaxy S. It had a large, bright AMOLED display, something Apple didn't have yet. A slim, stylish body, a powerful processor, a growing list of apps. The Galaxy S didn't just compete with the iPhone. It offered something different. Choice. Different sizes, different prices, still premium quality. And this was Samsung's secret. While Apple focused on one or two models, Samsung gave customers options. Why 2010 mattered. By 2010, Samsung stood on three massive pillars: chips, the invisible gold, powering devices worldwide. Displays, the face of modern electronics supplied to the world. Mobile, the device in everyone's pocket, now with Samsung's name on it. The company had gone from follower to trendsetter, from cheap to premium, from surviving a crisis to leading an industry. But the real fight was just beginning. Lawsuits with Apple, the Note 7 disaster, foldable phones, and a global race to dominate 5G. By 2010, Samsung had climbed to a position many thought was impossible years before. They weren't just a TV brand, not just a chip maker. They were a full technology powerhouse. They had chips in millions of devices. They made the brightest displays in the industry. They were now a serious player in the mobile phone market. But success is never the end of the journey. It's the start of bigger challenges. When the Samsung Galaxy S launched in 2010, it sent a clear message. Samsung wasn't afraid of Apple's iPhone anymore. The phone was thin. The AMOLED screen was bright and colorful, making videos and pictures pop. It was fast, smooth, and, most importantly, customizable. Apple's iPhone was elegant but limited in personalization. The Galaxy S gave users choices, wallpapers, widgets, different screen sizes. This was the beginning of the Galaxy series. A brand within a brand. Every year after that, Samsung released new Galaxy models. They weren't just small updates. They were big steps forward. Bigger screens before big screens were trendy. Better cameras before people demanded them. Water resistance before many competitors. Samsung had learned something from their early electronics days. If you want to win, stay ahead in features, not just match your rivals. With great competition comes great conflict. In 2011, Apple sued Samsung for allegedly copying the iPhone's design. The battle went on for years, in multiple countries, costing both sides hundreds of millions of dollars in legal fees. Courtrooms were filled with lawyers holding phones as evidence. Media outlets turned it into a global tech soap opera. Samsung didn't back down. They countersued Apple for infringing on their technology patents. While lawyers fought, Samsung engineers kept working on the next Galaxy. The legal war may have been a distraction, but in the public's eyes, it meant one thing. Samsung was now in Apple's league. By 2012, Samsung wasn't just surviving the smartphone race, they were leading it. The Galaxy S3 was a global hit. Its slogan, "Designed for Humans," was everywhere. It sold over 70 million units. For many, this was their first smartphone. It was powerful but approachable, stylish but practical. And unlike Apple, Samsung offered a wide range of phones, from affordable models to premium flagships. This allowed them to reach billions of people, not just the high-end market. In 2011, Samsung did something people thought was crazy. They released the Galaxy Note. It was huge for the time, with a 5.3-inch screen when most phones were around 3.5 inches. It came with a stylus, S Pen, something people thought was outdated. Critics laughed. They called it too big to be a phone. But customers loved it. It was the first real phablet, a phone-tablet hybrid. Artists, business people, and tech lovers embraced the larger screen. The Note line became one of Samsung's biggest successes. While everyone saw Samsung's flashy phones and TVs, most people didn't know another secret. Samsung was supplying key parts to other companies. They sold OLED displays to other phone brands, processors to companies like Apple, memory chips to almost every tech giant. This meant that even if someone bought a competitor's device, Samsung might still make money from it. It was like being the chef for the whole industry, not just running your own restaurant. By 2015, Samsung's designs had evolved. The Galaxy S6 introduced a premium glass and metal build. The Galaxy S7 perfected water resistance and camera performance. Reviewers called the S7 the best smartphone in the world at the time. Sales were massive. Samsung was on top of the world. Then came 2016, and one of the biggest crises in Samsung's history. The Galaxy Note 7 was supposed to be their masterpiece, powerful, stylish, with top-of-the-line features. But shortly after launch, reports started coming in. Some devices were catching fire due to battery defects. Flights banned the phone. News channels played footage of burnt devices. Memes and jokes spread online. Samsung tried to recall and replace the phones with safe versions. But even some replacements caught fire. In the end, Samsung had no choice but to cancel the Note 7 entirely. It cost them over $5 billion in losses. Worse, their reputation was on the line. Samsung responded fast. They apologized publicly, launched a new 8-point battery safety check, and became more transparent about quality testing. They promised to win back trust, not with words, but with action. The next Note model, the Galaxy Note 8 in 2017, was a success. It showed that Samsung could recover from disaster stronger than before. Between 2017 and 2018, Samsung's flagship phones, the Galaxy S8, S9, and Note 9, featured infinity displays with no bezels, edge-to-edge curved glass, enhanced cameras with low-light magic. Samsung was no longer just competing with Apple. In some areas, they were leading the industry. The Note 7 disaster could have ended Samsung's dominance. Many companies never recover from such a public failure. But Samsung's response, quick recalls, safety reforms, better designs, turned a weakness into proof of strength. Customers saw a company willing to admit mistakes and fix them. And that is why, by 2018, Samsung still held the crown as the world's largest smartphone maker. Part 4. The Future Unfolds, 2019 to today. By the end of 2018, Samsung stood tall. They had survived disasters, defeated giants, and proven they could rise again from any fall. They were the world's largest smartphone maker, a leader in TVs, chips, and displays. But the tech world doesn't stop. If you pause, even for a moment, someone else will take your place. Samsung knew this. They had to think beyond today. 2019 wasn't just another year. It was the beginning of a new technology race. 5G networks promised faster internet than anything before. AI, artificial intelligence, was becoming part of daily life. And Samsung wanted to launch something no one else dared: foldable smartphones. For years, engineers in Samsung's secret labs had been working on bendable displays. They wanted a phone that could fold like a book, giving you a small device in your pocket, but a tablet-sized screen when opened. In early 2019, they finally showed the world the Samsung Galaxy Fold. It looked like science fiction brought to life. But there was a problem. Just before launch, reviewers found issues with the Fold screen. Some displays broke after just a few days of use. It was a nightmare Samsung didn't want. Another public embarrassment, right when they were still proving their strength after the Note 7 crisis. But instead of hiding, Samsung delayed the launch, fixed the problems, and released an improved version months later. It was a clear message. We will not rush. We will not hide. We will make it right. While working on foldables, Samsung was also racing ahead in 5G technology. They launched some of the world's first 5G smartphones and helped build 5G network equipment in multiple countries. This wasn't just about faster YouTube videos. It was about powering self-driving cars, remote surgeries, and smart cities. By controlling both the devices and the infrastructure, Samsung secured its role in the future of global communication. Samsung didn't just focus on phones. They kept dominating other tech sectors. TVs, pushing 8K resolution, QLED technology, and ultra-thin designs. Chips, supplying memory and processors to the world's biggest brands. Appliances, smart fridges, AI-powered washing machines, and connected home devices. They weren't just a phone company. They were an ecosystem, a network of products that worked together, from your kitchen to your office to your car. In 2020, COVID-19 shook the world. Supply chains broke, factories shut down, many companies collapsed. Samsung faced massive challenges, keeping workers safe, securing parts for devices, and adjusting to the sudden spike in demand for home electronics. People now needed better phones for video calls, bigger TVs for home entertainment, laptops and tablets for remote work and school. Samsung quickly shifted production priorities to meet these needs. They showed once again that speed and flexibility win in a crisis. After fixing early foldable problems, Samsung went all in. They released the Galaxy Z Flip and Galaxy Z Fold 2, sleeker, stronger, and more reliable. The Z Flip flipped open like a classic phone but had a modern touchscreen. The Z Fold opened like a book into a mini tablet. Critics praised Samsung for turning a risky idea into a new category of devices. Suddenly, other brands wanted to make foldables too. But Samsung had already taken the lead. Behind the scenes, Samsung's semiconductor business was bigger than ever. They weren't just making memory chips now. They were producing advanced processors that competed directly with Intel and TSMC. These chips powered everything from smartphones to servers running the internet. Even companies competing against Samsung in phones were buying chips and screens from Samsung. It was the ultimate strategy. If we don't sell them the device, we'll sell them the parts to make it. The smartphone market had changed. Chinese brands like Huawei, Xiaomi, and Oppo were rising fast. Apple was still a strong rival, but Samsung held its position through constant innovation, wide price range, from budget phones to luxury flagships, strong after-sales service and global presence. They made sure a Samsung phone could be found in almost every country on Earth. In recent years, Samsung has also focused on environmental responsibility. They've reduced plastic packaging, invested in recycling programs, and developed energy-efficient products. They even created programs where old phone parts are reused to make new devices. This isn't just about saving the planet. It's about building trust with the next generation of customers who care about sustainability. Looking back, Samsung's story is a masterclass in resilience, surviving war, financial crises, and product disasters. Adaptability, moving from trading dried fish to making cutting-edge foldable phones. Vision, investing in chips, screens, and networks before others saw their value. Quality, from burning defective phones to building world-class safety checks. Now, Samsung is not just a company, it's a global empire. They lead in smartphones, TVs, memory chips, displays, and home appliances. They are in your pocket, in your living room, in your office, and even in your car. Their products touch billions of lives every day, and their journey shows one truth. Greatness comes from the courage to change and the will to keep moving forward, no matter what. This is where the story of Samsung for now reaches the present. But their future? It's still being written. In every innovation, every screen, every chip, and every dream they dare to chase. And so, my friends, we have reached the end of Samsung's incredible journey. From a small shop selling dried fish in 1938 to a global technology empire touching billions of lives. Today, Samsung is valued at over $350 billion, and their annual revenue crosses $200 billion. They are not just a company. They are a symbol of what vision, courage, and resilience can build. Their story is not just about business. It's about human spirit. It's about never giving up, even when the world seems to be against you. It's about making mistakes, admitting them, and coming back stronger than before. Lessons from Samsung's story. Start small, dream big. Your beginnings don't define your limits. 2. Quality is everything. A bad product can destroy trust. A good one can build an empire. 3. Adapt fast. The world changes every day. Only the quick survive. 4. Turn crisis into fuel. Every setback can become your greatest teacher. 5. Lead, don't follow. Be the one setting trends, not just chasing them. Samsung's journey teaches us that even a small seed planted with care can grow into a tree that touches the sky. It shows that true success is not about avoiding problems. It's about how you face them. May Samsung continue to innovate, inspire, and make lives better for people across the world. God bless them, and may their story inspire all of us to keep moving forward toward our own dreams.